Now, in the context of the project, we have to create a library of experiences with women who have had the experience of digital burnout due to the remote working circumstance during the pandemic, or even prior to it, as it is your case, if I remember correctly.
Yes. I just want to tell you that I wasn't working remotely. I was working in an office, and it was like the standard 9 to 5 job per se, but it was more hours than that. And I wasn't working digitally. I was in the office. So for me, it was a little bit of a different setup. So I hope it's it's still applicable to what you're looking for.
Okay. I would like to ask you, in general, how has your life changed due to the pandemic? And what were the positive and negative aspects that you saw in all this experience?
And working during the pandemic, because for most of the pandemic, I wasn't working. I had actually quit my job after my burnout, and I decided to take some time off from work. During which I also decided to change my life around completely and actually leave from the city I was living in, which was Brussels, and quit my job and decided to move to Greece as the pandemic started. So that was in March 2020. So I moved to Athens, and we were quite deep in the pandemic then. But at the same time, during that time, I was very digitally connected, in the sense that I was looking for a job online, having gone through a burnout, which was quite difficult for me. But I was digitally connected a lot in terms of me trying to find a job online, obviously, because you couldn't meet people. You know, the world of work had changed completely. There was a lot of unemployment. There was a lot of uncertainty. So that was, you know, coming out of a pandemic and then having that anxiety and that stress to find a job also online definitely fed into this whole, you know, burnout environment that a lot of people were experiencing through work. My full-time job then was to find a job, and that was difficult. So, but a lot has changed. I found a job. I am working remotely now from Athens for an office. My office is in Brussels. It's in Belgium again. So yeah, I think in a nutshell, that was my experience in the pandemic. It was mainly trying to recover from my burnout, and at the same time trying to find a job and avoid getting a burnout again. Went from having a job which was 100% in the office to obviously taking that break that I mentioned earlier, and then now I'm 100% remote, which definitely now I understand how and why so many people have come to the point of burnout over the pandemic, because you're constantly looking at a screen and you're constantly connected, and having so many calls instead of face-to-face meetings with colleagues definitely sort of feeds into the destruction of someone's well-being. And I'm in a position where I don't have children. I'm alone. I'm alone at home, and I still struggle sometimes to to be switched on and connected all the time. Migraines are very common, very common for me, having to be on Zoom the entire time. And also, you know, work has its successes. You know, you have your successes and you also have your challenges. And sometimes the challenges you also need to kind of discuss them and have a colleagues near you and just talk about them, but also have and celebrate the successes, which is not possible. So I do struggle from that perspective in working 100% remotely, and also having gone through burnout. I'm very, very alert and very aware on my boundaries, and when I need to stop working because I just don't feel good. I don't feel well. So it's having that light or those flags, kind of being aware of them and trying to prevent that happening to you again.
Would you like to tell me a little bit about this experience and how it was for you, what happened, and how you dealt with it?
I was working in Brussels in a consultancy. Consultancies also have this reputation of, working overtime with no pay, and just kind of giving your 1000% to all the clients that you have to manage. I was a senior manager. So due to many different circumstances within the company, poor management, lack of staff, we weren't hiring new people. I found myself having a lot of responsibility for too many things at the same time, and also not setting my boundaries and not saying no to a lot of projects. So it was, I was wearing, I was working overtime, and it was almost like a badge of honor for me, climbing the corporate ladder, constantly striving to get the promotion. So there were a lot of factors involved, and which brought me to a point. And at the same time, I was also having psychological therapy. I was doing therapy with my psychologist, and was trying to kind of manage and put everything into perspective. But I think I let it go on for too long, and my day-to-day was basically a constant struggle, in the sense that I had a bottomless inbox. I had this feeling, this constant feeling of not accomplishing anything, even though I would have, go to meetings and, answer hundreds of emails every day. I just felt like nothing was enough. I wasn't doing enough. And I was completely unfulfilled. So from an emotional perspective, it was that sense of nothing is getting done, and there's constantly more and more work to do. And then from a physical perspective, I remember just going home and, sitting on my sofa to just remove my shoes, and then actually passing out for 2 hours, and then waking up and not knowing where I was. I had a very foggy mind. My brain wasn't so alert, and I would be talking to one colleague at some point and then not remember what we had talked about the next minute. I had panic attacks. I suffered from panic attacks as well. And just generally a sense of helplessness, getting in the shower in the morning before going to work and crying like a child doesn't want to go to school. It was a little bit like that. It was so foggy, and it was really difficult to manage. And at the same time, I was also grieving for my mom's death. So I think a lot of personal aspects, and also the way that the company was managing the team, just altogether made my experience really difficult. I decided to do, after many therapy sessions and talking to my support a support group, that I decided to actually take some time off from work. Thankfully, the system in Belgium, the welfare system, is really supportive when it comes to burnout. So I was able to take an extended amount of time off from work. My burnout time off was split into two. So I took about 6 weeks off the first time, and then decided to actually return to work, very naively thinking that I can go back to my 9 to 5 job. And work full time until the 4th day. When I returned to work, that same week, 4 days later, I actually had a mental breakdown, and because nothing had changed, and because obviously things can't change from one day to the next. But I was very naive in thinking that I was able to mentally support all of the responsibility that I had before, and still continue to do it. So I went on medical leave again, and that lasted for about 6 more months or 7 months, to which then I came to the point where I decided I was going to quit my job and leave Belgium altogether.
So had you ever talked with someone, and maybe was there any kind of support offered from your workplace, from people that...
When you're experiencing burnout, you don't realize it's burnout, right? So I wasn't sure what was. I was just very exhausted and very tired. So what I did address with my management was that I needed to hire someone. We needed to hire 2 more people to do a job that I was doing, a job of 3 people. So after many attempts, I think it was about 3 times, they decided to, approve my request to hire someone, but it was too late. And in the end, I did hire a junior consultant to support me with the work, but 3 weeks into her into the job from her. She joined, and 3 weeks later I actually had to go on medical leave because it was already too late, because I had addressed the issue 6 months before that. So I had to wait 6 months, and by that time I was at a point where I really couldn't support anything. I couldn't do any of the work. So yes, I did, and I think that was a big learning for me in terms of that I wasn't listened to, and I think that is something that affects a lot of people that are going through burnout. There's some red threads that I have spoken to a few people who have suffered burnout, and I see so many similarities in our experiences, and that is that you are not listened to, that the person who is responsible for your work and your well-being in the company thinks that it's not as bad as you say it is. But unfortunately, mental health is not, it's not like, you know, you have broken your leg or your arm where it's very visible. It's mental health. So you might turn up at work, look great, but inside you're completely suffering. So it's very difficult for someone to understand that. So because there is not a lot of awareness, there's still not so much awareness about mental health, particularly in the workplace. So my therapist had been telling me for a very long time before I went on medical leave that I needed to go on medical leave. And I responded to her telling her that I'm only going to go on medical leave when I end up in hospital, because I felt that I had so much on, there were so many people depending on me and the work that I had to do, that I would be letting everyone else down. But the only person I was letting down was myself. So that was it was a pivotal moment. And that was the first part. And then the second part was that shortly thereafter, my then boss and line manager, who was a great, who is an amazing human being, a brilliant professional, and was also a mentor for me as a communications professional. He actually gave in his notice, and he was going to be leaving the company, which kind of, in a way, made me feel like I was being completely abandoned, you know, in this entire mess that I was feeling. And then subsequently, because he left, it took about 9 months to replace him. He was at director level. A lot of the senior work that he was doing was being passed on to me, and a couple of other colleagues were more at a higher level within the company. So a mix of all those things. Then I just realized I'm alone. I have so much work to do, and I don't want to end up in hospital. So I really need to talk to someone, to talk to management, to help me.
What were the main lessons you learned from this experience?
So a big life lesson was that the only person that can look after you is yourself. So, you know, there are always going to be people in companies who, you know, might not have the management style that necessarily suits you, and that, you know, you have colleagues who are also struggling to kind of keep the company together. But at the end of the day, it's what you do. So my learning was that you need to look internally, not externally. So finding out or trying to figure out what it is that you can do to make your situation a little bit better, and whether and how you can actually get out of it, because it's not possible for you to try to make someone else understand exactly how you feel. You only know how you feel. And whilst I did ask for the support from my management, I actually realized that I hadn't set my boundaries. It was all me. It's not a blame game. I'm not blaming myself, and I'm not blaming the company, because companies go through different trajectories. They can have some financial difficulties at some point, so they can't hire people. So I learned, you know, I took the responsibility. Instead of pointing the finger to the others, I pointed it to myself and said, okay, what can I do with this? And my learning was that I need to set my boundaries. I need to be able to be confident to say, no, I cannot help with this at this moment. I can happily help you in tomorrow or in a couple of weeks' time. So setting your boundaries and and just being very, very self-aware. Mental health is something that affects a lot of people, and it's not possible. You cannot expect your boss or management to guess that you're not feeling well. So you should really try to find the confidence to talk to the people internally, and also seek help in safe spaces like therapists, finding support groups, seeing what is possible within your environment to get support from. So when I was looking for a new job, when I was interviewing with different companies, the questions I asked those companies were very much around the culture and how employees are treated. I mean, there's only so much you can know before you enter a company, but that was also a mechanism for me to ensure that if I were to join a company, that they have an environment that supports their employees and their mental health. So whatever resources, whatever help is available to you, try to use it, because it's a minefield. It's so difficult to give meaning and reason to how you're feeling because you're so lost. So I would say that's definitely one piece of advice I would give. And I think it's also important for employers to understand, what a serious issue there is, and take the necessary measures and provide the right resources to their employees to actually help them avoid or at least manage burnout. So